Being quiet is not a weakness. This is why. Guided by the Quiet Guide. Someone in your life has called you quiet, and if you are honest, it did not always feel neutral when they said it. Sometimes it sounded like concern, like something you were supposed to grow out of, and other times it was said casually, almost in passing, but it stayed with you longer than it should have. You carried it, not because it was true, but because it was repeated enough to feel real. And over time, without anyone sitting you down and saying it directly, an idea began to form quietly in the background. That your stillness is something to fix, that your silence means you have less to offer, that the world somehow belongs to those who speak first and speak the loudest. And if you have ever felt that tension, like you are moving at a different pace to everything around you, then you already know how subtle that pressure can be. But here's the question most people never stop to ask. Who decided that loud meant valuable in the first place? Because when you slow it down, really look at it without rushing past it, that belief starts to fall apart. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, the way truth usually reveals itself. We live in a world that rewards noise, and after a while that noise starts to look like confidence. People who respond quickly are seen as sharp. People who fill silence are seen as engaged, and people who constantly project themselves outward are seen as strong. And if you are someone who does not naturally operate that way, it can begin to feel like you are slightly out of sync, like you are always half a step behind a conversation that is moving too fast to think properly. You might sit in a meeting with a fully formed thought and still choose not to say it, not because you cannot, but because something in you is waiting for the right moment, the right framing, the right level of clarity. And slowly, that restraint gets mislabeled. It gets called hesitation. It gets called lack of confidence. But let's be honest for a moment. That is not what it is. What is actually happening is something most people never take the time to develop. While others are reacting, you are registering. While others are speaking, you are understanding. You are not just hearing words. You are picking up tone, noticing shifts, sensing what is being said and what is being avoided at the same time. And that kind of awareness does not always show up immediately, but when it does, it carries weight. If you trace this idea back, you start to see where the misunderstanding began. It did not start with you. It started with systems that needed visible signals, classrooms that rewarded participation because it was easy to measure, workplaces that rewarded visibility because it was easy to justify. Over time, being heard became shorthand for being capable, and that is where the shortcut formed. Speak more, be seen more, project more, and you will be valued more. Simple, clean, efficient, and not entirely true. Because depth does not work like that. Stillness does not perform on command. It gathers, it processes, it waits until something meaningful is ready to be said. And if you think about the most precise people you have encountered in your life, the ones whose words actually stayed with you, they were rarely the ones speaking the most. They were the ones who spoke with intention. So let's make this practical for a moment, because if this is you, there are certain patterns you will recognize immediately. The first is this quiet pause you have before reacting. You notice it, especially in fast situations. Something happens, something is said, and instead of jumping in, you take a moment. Not a long one, just enough to understand what is actually happening. And in a world that moves quickly, that pause can look like hesitation. But it is not hesitation. It is control. The second is something you may not even realize about yourself. You do not rely heavily on external validation. You might appreciate it, of course. Everyone does. But your decisions are not built on it. You can stand by something even when it is not immediately understood, and that gives your choices a kind of stability that is hard to shake. The third is more subtle, but if you pay attention, you will see it. People tend to feel comfortable around you. They open up more easily. They say things they would not say in louder spaces, and it is not because you are trying to create that effect. It is because your presence does not demand anything from them. And in a world that constantly demands attention, that kind of space feels rare. The fourth is how you think. You are not interested in performing intelligence in the moment. You would rather take your time and get it right than rush to sound right. And that difference, it shows. People may not always notice it immediately, but they feel it over time. And then there is the fifth, the way you use words. You do not speak just to fill space. You speak when there is something worth saying. And because of that, when you do speak, people tend to listen differently. Not because you are louder, but because your words carry intention. Now, this becomes even more clear in moments of tension. When things get uncomfortable, most people speed up. Their reactions sharpen, their voices rise, and everything becomes more immediate. But you tend to do the opposite. You slow down, you become still. And to someone who expects reaction, that can look like withdrawal. But it is not withdrawal, it is regulation. You are not being pulled into the moment, you are holding your position within it. And that creates space to see what is actually happening, not just what is being expressed. And in high-pressure situations, that space is often where the real advantage is. There is also something worth understanding about restraint, because it is often misunderstood. Restraint is not silence because you cannot respond. It is silence because you have decided not to. And that difference is everything. Every time you choose not to engage in something that drains you, every time you let something pass that does not deserve your energy, you are not losing ground. You are directing your attention. And attention, whether people realize it or not, is one of the most valuable resources you have. If you look at environments where the stakes are genuinely high, medicine, leadership, negotiation, you start to notice a pattern. The people who hold those environments together are not chaotic. They are grounded. They do not rush to fill silence. They use it. And because of that, people trust them. So if you have ever been told you need to be louder to be effective, it is worth pausing and asking, effective according to who? Because the environments that matter most tend to reward clarity, not noise. And this brings us to something many quiet people struggle with, the need to explain themselves, to justify why they prefer space, why they step back, why they do not always engage at the same level as everyone else. But here is the truth. You do not need to explain your nature. You do not need to translate yourself into something louder just to make others comfortable. Your energy is not public property, and protecting it is not selfish. It is necessary. So if you were to take anything practical from this, it would not be about becoming different. It would be about becoming more certain in how you carry yourself, in how you use your silence, in how you allow yourself to move at your own pace. Stop apologizing for your quiet. Let it stand. Use the pause deliberately. Invest in depth, not noise. Protect your mornings before the world reaches for your attention. And most importantly, recognize this clearly. Your quiet is not a gap, it is a contribution. You do not need to become louder. You need to become more certain about what you already are. Because being quiet was never the problem. It was simply misunderstood in a world that does not always recognize depth when it is not performing. And if this sat with you, not loudly, but steadily, then you are exactly where you need to be. And if someone came to mind while listening, someone who carries this same kind of quiet strength, share this with them. If you found value here, a like or a quiet comment helps this space grow. It signals to the algorithm that there are still people who prefer depth over noise. And if you want more conversations like this, calm, steady, thoughtful, consider subscribing. No pressure, just an invitation. This is Quiet Grind Daily, where self-improvers reset. Calm mind, consistent action. I will see you in the next quiet moment.